Hello, I'm Bruce DePoy. Coming up today on News Talk, a conversation with Northern Virginia Congressman Don Beyer. Among our topics, the Iran deal. Congress takes up the controversial agreement to limit Iran's nuclear program when lawmakers return to town later this month. And is the federal government going to run out of money? Congressional critics of Planned Parenthood say it's time the federal spigot be turned off, and they're pushing for a big-time showdown. Later in the program, D.C.'s struggle to bring its crime numbers down. We'll talk with Kenya McDuffie, the D.C. councilman who chairs the committee that oversees public safety. Your calls included.
From News Channel 8, this is News Talk with Bruce DePoy.
Welcome in on this Thursday. Another great lineup for you this time. We're so glad to have you there. Imagine having a job where you don't do all that much work and you're always on vacation. Well, that's Congress these days. Now, in fairness, lawmakers are due back soon, and they have a long to-do list in front of them. Northern Virginia Congressman Don Beyer is here, a Democrat. He represents the 8th District. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce, very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
By the way, it's not all vacation time.
I know.
Most people are trying to work very hard in their districts.
It's
the things back home.
And you commute to your district, so you're there all the time.
I'm in the district every day.
You are. It's great to have you here. So many issues. Let's dive right in.
Sure.
There was news from one of your regional colleagues the other day, Barbara Mikulski, signing on to the Iran deal. Not enough to give it a majority in the Senate, but enough that if a disapproval resolution passes both chambers and is vetoed by President Obama, it comes back to Congress and the veto cannot be overridden. As you analyze the pros and cons of the Iran deal, where do you come down?
Bruce, on the very first day, I was out very strongly for the Iran deal. You know, I was ambassador to Switzerland for 4 years, and Switzerland has represented the United States in Iran since the embassy was taken over back in 79, 80. And all that time I was overseas, we were working to get the Europeans and the Swiss particularly to obey the Iran sanctions. The old idea is bring Iran to the table so we can negotiate. And frankly, this is a much better deal than I thought was possible. We're going to reduce their centrifuges by most, get rid of most of their enriched uranium. We're destroying their big Iraq power plant that was going to make the plutonium. We've basically, they've gone from 2 months away from a nuclear weapon to at least 15 years away. That's a huge advantage for everyone, especially Israel.
Is the inspection regime robust enough that Iran's neighbors can sleep at night?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. We're going to have IAEA out of Vienna. The inspectors will be on site at all the known sites right now. We're unfolding the previous military work that Iran has done. And even on a new site, which would take something like 24 days to get into, all the atomic experts say there's no way they can hide that radioactivity in just a few weeks.
Do you trust the Iranians?
Well, you know, I think we have the whole idea that we have to have the verification. No one really trusts the Iranians. But this is in their best interest, too. The sanctions have destroyed their economy. They need to get back into the world picture. And I think that's why everyone says much better for the Iranians to give up their nuclear ambitions, get their economy growing again, become part of the world.
Because for some, the notion that you can't trust the people with whom you're across the table in negotiation, if there's not some element of trust, then the whole exercise, why do it? And what's the deal worth at the end of the day? Yeah. If they're not trustworthy, and if their long-term goal, as many people believe, is to have a weapons program, not just an energy program, then are we deluding ourselves? Are we setting ourselves up for a really unhappy scenario down the road?
Well, Bruce, the big thing is, what's the alternative? First of all, we have to understand that this was an international negotiated treaty. So France, Germany, Russia, England, China have all signed this. It was presented to the United Nations, and every nation but one voted for it, and that was only Israel against it. So whether we bail out or not, the world will respect this agreement, as will Iran.
Why do you think opposition in Congress is running so strong?
Well, part of it is the almost hatefully partisan nature of Congress, that President Obama did this, and therefore it's bad, which is unfortunate. There's also the longer-term concern. We realize that Iran is an existential threat to Israel, and we want to do what we can, what's best for Israel in the middle and the long run. So I think some people, unfortunately, are looking at the short term rather than the long term.
let's talk about what happens when lawmakers come back in terms of funding. The opposition to Planned Parenthood, which was considerable before these videos, these heavily edited videos surfaced, and we'll talk about those separately in a moment, but can you just give us the lay of the land in terms of what needs to happen by what date so that agencies don't run out of funding? Our listeners and your constituents pay close attention to matters of federal funding for obvious reasons.
Yeah, well, the somewhat good news is the House and Senate have already passed a number of budgets, sort of department by department, the defense budget, Homeland Security, and others. But they haven't been signed by the White House. Many of them have poison pills in them, and all of it has been complicated by the really unfortunate and, as you say, heavily edited Planned Parenthood video. So you have folks like Senator Ted Cruz out there saying, unless Planned Parenthood is zero, no budget. And what we miss for people, especially that are concerned about abortion, a number of abortions, is that Planned Parenthood is the most effective entity in the United States that reduces the number of abortions, reduces the STDs, the sexually transmitted diseases. You know, a plurality of poor women get their birth control through Planned Parenthood. So if you're against abortion, we want to strengthen the part of Planned Parenthood that's preventing the unplanned pregnancies.
How much of a squeeze do GOP leaders like John Boehner and Mitch McConnell find themselves in now as they feel the pressure from one side, the anti-Planned Parenthood energy, the desire to see progress, as they would describe it, and a seizing of the moment, versus what I think some on the Hill, on the GOP side, recognize as a sort of a lose-lose based on recent experience whenever there is a government shutdown, and who the public seems to hold more responsible.
I know it is complicated. I think it's especially complicated for Speaker Boehner, who has the so-called Freedom Caucus made up of the Tea Party folks. Although it'll be interesting to see how that works out, because they tend to be very much focused on the deficit rather than on the social issues, the quasi-religious issues like abortion access. So it'll be interesting to see what coalition comes together. The problem with the heavily edited Planned Parenthood video is that it becomes a polarizing issue. It's a way to divide people, and it's a way to raise lots of money online, and it's a way to be flamboyant in your district. It's not the kind of thing that brings people together, and that's what we need, is finding a logical center that we can all live with.
What do you think happens?
I don't know. I mean, before this, I would have thought there was a 40% chance that, not that we'd have a shutdown, but that we would end up with continuing resolutions. You would get last year's budget just rolled over, which is not great. I mean, you spend all this time trying to do intelligent appropriations, spending, cutting, increasing where you can. But with the Planned Parenthood, the likelihood of the rollover gets much higher.
What do you think it will take to get back to what on the Hill they call regular order budgeting, that is the sorts of thoughtful budgeting we should have, not the lurching from crisis to crisis with and the absence of agency planning that I think we all want and deserve, and that folks who are in the federal agencies want and deserve.
Yeah, I'm a happy co-sponsor of Congressional Republican Reed Ribble's bill to go to a 2-year budget, which means that when you get a deal, it's good for 2 years rather than one. We have it in Virginia, and always have. I hope that will someday happen. We did get budgets on time back in April, which was a good thing. The dilemma was that you have in Congress first you authorize and then you appropriate. That process is going to be a long time. I think until we overcome the existential crisis between those who believe the deficit is the greatest problem facing America and those, the side I'm on, which thinks we need to make the investments in healthcare, education, our transportation system, and that we can grow our way into prosperity.
How closely are you following the situation at Metro, the financial, some say very significant financial challenges they face, the leadership vacuum? We're coming up on a year since Richard Sarles told the board that he was going to be leaving. He's been gone since January. We have no idea where the search is or when it will produce a new leadership, a new leader, a new general manager, as well as the safety issues that are in the paper and in the news every day.
We follow it very, very closely. I have a wonderful staffer, Mike Lucier, who I think he spends 8 hours a day just tracking Metro. I'm very concerned about it. The biggest thing of all is this lack of leadership. There's been this debate among the Metro board members. Do we want a new leader who's a transit specialist or a new leader who is a turnaround artist? And I've always thought that you can always hire experience, but what's really hard to find is somebody that's a great leader. And that's who we need. Metro's got so many things that we have to fix. The safety culture, the internal workings of the personnel culture, the fact that we had we discovered all these defects that we then neglected, and they had the derailment, all the financial things. The hard part for the members of the delegation here in the Metro Washington, Democrat and Republican, making the case to senators and congressmen from across the country that we should continue to invest $100 million in Metro every year. It's hard to do that if they look and say it's not well managed.
The split on the board is well publicized. What would you say, though? I mean, disagreements happen all the time in every sphere of life. The Metro board is one example. What would you say to the members? I want to say get in a room and work it out. Enough of this delay. It's got to be resolved at some point, and the delay is killing us. So what's the deal?
Yeah, the fierce urgency of now. I mean, we really need to do it. I don't know, but we're going to try to press them as hard as we can, especially as we come back in session on Tuesday.
Talking with Northern Virginia Congressman Don Beyer. We'll take a quick break here. We're back, though, with much more News Talk for an action-packed Thursday right after this.